The studio lights blazed hot, casting sharp shadows across the polished floor as the moderator announced, "Tonight, we face the fire, Denzel Washington vs. Karoline Leavitt." The audience erupted, a mix of eager cheers and nervous laughter. Karoline adjusted her blazer, wearing the smirk of someone who thought she'd rehearsed every angle, every attack line. Denzel, however, leaned forward, his gaze locked like a steel trap. He wasn't here to play political theater, he was here to slice through it. Karoline started, her voice confident but rehearsed. The Biden administration is failing. The economy is on its knees, the border is chaos, and all Democrats can do is smear President Trump while ignoring the people's struggles. That's why I proudly stand with Trump, the only leader who can restore order. The words had barely settled before Denzel leaned closer to his mic. His voice, low but thunderous, carried an undeniable weight. "Karoline, let me get this straight, you stand with a man who's turned the White House into his personal circus, who left the economy bleeding, who mocked veterans, and who now has you cleaning up his mess like a political maid. You think defending him makes you strong? No. It makes you complicit." The crowd gasped, some clapped, others booed. Karoline's smirk faltered. She snapped back, "Don't lecture me on loyalty, Denzel. You're an actor, not a policymaker. You don't understand the pressures of Washington." Denzel's eyes narrowed, and his reply came sharp as glass. "Don't hide behind that excuse. I may be an actor, but at least I don't act loyal to a man who treats America like a bargain brand to sell off." Every policy he touched crumbled. "And you defend him because your career depends on his shadow. But the American people aren't blind. They see the rot, and no spin you sell will change that." The studio buzzed, tension thick as a storm rolling in. Cameras zoomed tighter on both faces. Denzel didn't raise his voice, but his calm fury filled the room in a way no shout could. Karoline tightened her jaw, clearly rattled by the force in Denzel's words. Still, she pressed on, voice sharp, trying to regain control. "The real rot, Denzel, is in the Democratic Party. Inflation is through the roof, families can't afford groceries, and crime is spiraling in cities run by Democrats. President Trump gave us strength, pride, and jobs. You can't erase that just because you don't like his personality." The audience shifted, some nodding, some scoffing. But Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned back, folded his arms, and then spoke with the precision of someone cutting through fog with a blade. "Personality? Karoline, this isn't about personality. This is about integrity. Trump cheated contractors, lined his pockets with deals that crushed small businesses, and left ordinary Americans holding the bag. You want to talk about inflation? He passed tax cuts that ballooned the deficit and handed crumbs to working people while billionaires feasted. That's not leadership, that's looting." The crowd roared at the word looting. Karoline tried to laugh it off, but her eyes darted nervously toward the moderator, hoping for rescue. Denzel didn't let up. He pointed directly at her, his voice steady, almost cold. "And let's talk about crime. You want to point fingers at Democratic cities? Fine. But what about January 6th? What about the mobs Trump incited that attacked their own government? What about the people he told to fight like hell while he hid in safety? That wasn't strength. That was cowardice wrapped in chaos." The audience broke into loud applause, longer, stronger this time. Even those who weren't fans of Denzel couldn't ignore the raw, unfiltered truth he laid down. Karoline's cheeks flushed, she fumbled for her notes, then shot back, "You don't know what it's like to govern, Denzel. You're just sitting there playing the moral hero while real leaders make tough calls." Denzel leaned forward again, eyes blazing but voice calm. "Tough calls? Karoline, Trump didn't make tough calls, he made selfish ones. He gambled with America's future for his ego. And you? You're betting your career on his lies. That's not courage. That's desperation." The words hung heavy in the air. The studio was electric, every spectator locked in. This wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning. Karoline tried to clap back, her voice rising above the crowd's buzz. You sit here preaching as if you carry the burden of leadership. You don't. Trump had the guts to face China, to rebuild the military, to stand up when Democrats bowed to globalists. You may win applause here, but America remembers strength. Denzel let her finish. He sat still for a moment, his silence louder than her shouting. Then he leaned in, and his words cut the air with a sharpness that made the audience lean forward. Strength? Karoline, don't confuse bluster with backbone. Trump didn't rebuild the military, he staged photo ops. He didn't stand up to China, he cozied up while American farmers paid the price of his reckless trade wars. And as for globalists, he didn't fight them, he became one, profiting from foreign deals while promising America first. A ripple of applause surged, some people even standing. Denzel's tone hardened. Strength isn't screaming into a microphone. It isn't calling journalists enemies of the people or mocking war heroes. Strength is telling Americans the truth, even when it costs you politically. Strength is standing firm when democracy is on the line. And your man, your so-called strong leader, hid behind lawyers, cronies, and lies. Karoline's lips pressed into a tight line, but she fired back. You don't understand politics. You live in Hollywood fantasy, Denzel. Real leaders know compromise, deals, power. Denzel shook his head slowly, almost pitying her. Power without principle is corruption, Karoline. And that's exactly what Trump sold to this country, cheap power wrapped in rage. You call it leadership. I call it betrayal. The audience gasped, then erupted. One side cheering wildly, the other booing with equal passion. The studio had become a battlefield, energy crackling through every word. Karoline tried to regain control, raising her hand as if to calm the storm. But Denzel's voice thundered over the chaos, final and unshakable. You want America to forget? You want us to move past Trump's lies, his failures, his insults to soldiers, judges, citizens? No, Karoline. We don't forget. We don't move on. We hold him accountable. The room shook with applause, some people pounding the tables. Karoline blinked, caught in the spotlight, her rehearsed lines slipping from her grip. For the first time, she looked cornered. Karoline's frustration finally boiled over. She slammed her hand against the table, her voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. Accountability? Don't lecture me on accountability, Denzel. Democrats burn cities, open borders, destroy jobs, and you call Trump the problem? You don't live in the same America as real people. The audience roared, half cheering her defiance, half hissing in outrage. Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned back, his calm composure more dangerous than her shouting. His eyes narrowed as he began, his voice low, deliberate, every word carrying the weight of truth. Karoline, stop gaslighting this country. The cities you talk about are filled with working Americans who are trying to survive the economy Trump gutted, the healthcare he tried to strip away, the chaos he left behind. You keep screaming about borders, but what about the walls he built around truth? What about the jobs he promised that never came, the coal miners left behind, the factories that closed while he handed tax cuts to billionaires? A wave of clapping echoed, and Denzel's words grew sharper, his finger pointing directly across the table. You sit here defending the indefensible, thinking volume equals victory. But let me be clear, Trump didn't fight for America, he fought for Trump. Every decision, every rally, every so-called policy was about padding his ego and his wallet. That's not leadership, that's exploitation. Karoline tried to interject, but Denzel raised his voice just enough to silence her. And you, defending this circus, are enabling it. You want to talk about real America? Real America is tired of being pawns, tired of lies. Tired of politicians treating them like background props while billionaires laugh their way to the bank. The studio erupted, cheers, boos, shouts from the crowd colliding into a storm. Even the host tried to calm the chaos, but Denzel wasn't finished. His voice surged, commanding the room. Trump is not America. And Karoline, if you think defending his mess will save your career, you're as blind as the man you follow. America deserves better, better than lies, better than corruption, better than selling democracy for a headline. The final words hit like a hammer. Karoline froze, lips parted, her rehearsed attacks crumbling under the weight of his fire. The audience's applause thundered, drowning out everything else. Karoline tried to gather herself, pressing her palms against the table as though grounding her energy. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through with force. Denzel, you love to moralize, but you're ignoring reality. People loved Trump because he spoke for them. He didn't talk like a politician, he told it straight. That's why millions still stand behind him. You think you can shout down that loyalty with Hollywood speeches? A ripple of applause broke out from her corner of the audience, but it was shaky, lacking the conviction of true belief. Denzel let the noise fade, his face unreadable for a moment before he leaned in, his tone sharper than steel. Straight talk. That's what you call it? He raised his voice so the entire studio leaned in. Let me remind you what straight talk meant, mocking disabled reporters on live TV. Straight talk meant calling veterans losers and suckers. Straight talk meant downplaying a deadly pandemic that killed over 1 million Americans. If that's your definition of honesty, then you've already admitted the truth. You're not defending patriotism, you're defending cruelty. The words landed like a slap. Gasps rose from the crowd, followed by a surge of clapping that rolled across the studio like a wave. Karoline's jaw tightened, but her eyes darted nervously toward the cameras as Denzel pressed on. Trump didn't speak for the people, he continued, his voice now rising to a fiery crescendo. He spoke at them. He turned their fears into his personal currency. He sold them slogans instead of solutions, rage instead of results. And the tragedy is, people bought it. They bought the illusion that he was one of them, while he laughed from golden towers and cheated the very workers who built them. Denzel's hand cut through the air as the audience roared. And Karoline, you keep clinging to this fantasy like it's salvation. But let me tell you something, it's not loyalty, it's manipulation. And history will not remember Trump's followers as patriots, it will remember them as enablers of the worst betrayal this country has seen in decades. Karoline's face burned red, her lips trembling with the need to respond, but the thunderous applause from the audience made her words vanish before they even left her mouth. Denzel leaned back, the storm in his eyes still raging, and the camera zoomed in on his face, every viewer at home seeing the conviction etched into every line. Karoline finally forced herself to speak, her voice louder now, straining to rise above the applause that had swallowed the room. You act like you hold the moral high ground, Denzel, but you don't live in the real world. Trump gave us jobs, tax cuts, and pride when this country was weak. Ordinary families don't care about your Hollywood monologues, they care about results. Her words carried urgency, but they were drowned by murmurs of doubt rippling through the audience. Denzel sat still for a moment, letting her declaration hang in the air before he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers with a piercing calm that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Results, he repeated slowly, almost whispering. The silence stretched as the audience leaned forward. Then his voice cracked like thunder. You call record unemployment during COVID a result? You call thousands of small businesses closing their doors forever a result? You call a mountain of debt and farmers struggling to survive a result? The tension rose again, his words cutting through the studio like a blade. He raised a hand toward the audience. Let's be clear about the only results Trump delivered: division, chaos, and destruction. He turned Americans against each other. He made people believe neighbors were enemies. He sold rage on cable news while Americans buried their loved ones. If that's the result you're proud of, then shame on you for wearing it like a badge of honor. The audience erupted, some cheering wildly, others gasping at the raw force behind his words. The camera caught Karoline clenching her jaw, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Denzel didn't let up. Trump's legacy isn't jobs, Karoline. It's boarded-up factories. It's a divided nation. It's the lie that America was ever just a brand to be bought and sold. He left this country weaker, poorer, and more fractured than it's been in decades. And you, He jabbed a finger in her direction, his voice sharp as glass. You want to dress that failure up as victory. But America isn't blind. The people see through it, and they're done being conned. A wave of applause crashed over the studio, stronger than before, while Karoline struggled to steady her breathing. Denzel leaned back, eyes still locked on her, every inch of his posture declaring that this fight was far from over. Karoline finally pushed back from her chair, standing to face him as though sheer defiance could tilt the balance. Her voice cracked but carried. You don't get it, Denzel. Trump gave people hope when nobody else would. He told them they mattered, that their struggles weren't invisible. He reminded Americans they were strong. Denzel didn't rise, but his stillness was more intimidating than any sudden movement. His eyes followed her, sharp and unrelenting, until she faltered for half a breath. Then he spoke, steady and deliberate, his tone filled with contempt. Hope, he repeated, drawing the word out slowly. Don't insult this country by calling what Trump peddled hope. Hope builds bridges. Hope heals wounds. What he sold was fear. He told people their neighbors were their enemies. He told them immigrants were villains. He told them that only he could save them, and then he cashed in while the country bled. The audience roared in approval, but Denzel didn't break his stare. His words sharpened. You think giving angry speeches in red hats is leadership? You think waving a Bible outside a church after tear-gassing peaceful protesters is hope? No, that's exploitation. That's manipulation. That's the textbook playbook of a con man. Karoline shook her head, trying to interrupt, but Denzel cut through her like thunder. And let's talk about strength. Real strength isn't mocking veterans. Real strength isn't ridiculing the disabled. Real strength isn't hiding behind lawsuits when the truth comes knocking. Real strength is standing tall for every American, even the ones who don't clap for you. Tell me, Karoline, his voice rose like a storm, where was Trump's strength when children were caged at the border? Where was his strength when thousands of Americans died alone while he bragged about TV ratings? Where was it then? The applause hit like a wave crashing against rock, nearly drowning Karoline as she stood frozen, her lips parted but no sound escaping. The studio pulsed with raw energy, every clap and shout amplifying the power in Denzel's words. Slowly, he leaned forward, his voice lowering but every syllable laced with fire. You can stand there and dress him up as a savior all you want, but history won't remember Trump as strong. It will remember him as the man who sold America's dignity for applause. And one day soon, America will remember who really paid the price. The camera zoomed in on Karoline's trembling expression, her silence louder than any defense. The room belonged to Denzel now, and everyone knew it. The light seemed hotter now, the silence stretching before Karoline dared to breathe. She forced a shaky smile, but it betrayed her nerves more than it concealed them. You think you've got it all figured out, Denzel, she said, trying to project defiance. But you don't live in the real world of working families who loved Trump. You live in Hollywood, in mansions, in comfort. What do you know about sacrifice? Denzel's face hardened, but his voice carried the quiet fury of a man who refused to let lies stand. He leaned closer, his words sharp enough to slice through the air. Don't you dare lecture me about sacrifice, he growled, each syllable resonating with weight. I grew up watching my parents work themselves to the bone just to keep food on the table. I've walked the streets where opportunity doesn't come knocking, you have to chase it down. And you stand there defending a man who never sacrificed a damn thing in his life. Trump was handed millions, bankrupted businesses, cheated contractors, and left workers broken. That's not sacrifice. That's theft dressed up in a suit. The audience erupted with claps and shouts, many standing now, but Denzel pressed on, voice rising with righteous indignation. Do you know what sacrifice looks like, Karoline? It looks like veterans who gave their bodies and their peace of mind for this country while Trump mocked them. It looks like nurses in overcrowded hospitals who wore garbage bags when supplies ran out, while he called COVID a hoax. It looks like families scraping together 3 jobs just to afford rent, while he gave tax breaks to billionaires. That is sacrifice. Karoline flinched, her expression betraying the blow. But Denzel wasn't done. His hand slammed the table, rattling the microphones. And don't twist this into some Hollywood lecture. I'm not here to play a role, I'm here to tell the truth. Truth that burns. Truth that exposes. And the truth is this: Trump took America's struggles and turned them into a stage for his ego. He didn't lift up working families, he cashed in on their pain. You call that leadership? I call it betrayal. Gasps rippled through the crowd as his voice thundered across the studio. The camera caught Karoline's pale face, her forced smile fading into silence. Denzel straightened in his chair, his voice dropping but cutting even deeper. You said I don't know about sacrifice. But Karoline, I know this: if America keeps following men like Trump, the only sacrifice left will be its soul. The audience leapt to its feet, applause and chants shaking the walls. The sound wasn't just approval, it was a verdict. Karoline's voice trembled as she tried one last counter. You're making it sound like everything was disaster, but millions still believed in him. They saw hope in him. They saw a fighter. Denzel tilted his head, his expression cutting through her defense. Belief doesn't equal truth. Millions once believed cigarettes were healthy. Millions believed the earth was flat. Millions believed snake oil could cure disease. Just because people believed Trump's show doesn't mean it wasn't a con. He's the best salesman America's ever seen, but what he sold was poison wrapped in flags. The audience gasped, then erupted into laughter mixed with applause. Denzel stepped forward, his tone turning darker. And do you know the worst part? He didn't just sell it to strangers. He sold it to his own voters, the ones who trusted him the most. He bled them dry: donations, rallies, merchandise, every dollar pulled from wallets of people already struggling. That's not a fighter, Karoline. That's a leech. That's exploitation at its ugliest. Karoline tried to jump in, but Denzel's voice thundered louder. Trump turned the White House into a casino, and America lost every hand. Our allies walked away, our enemies laughed, and ordinary people paid the bill. And you? You stand here, defending a man who left office not with dignity, but with chaos and shame trailing behind him like a bad stench. The audience was on its feet now, clapping and shouting. The energy in the room was electric, shaking the studio like a storm. Karoline's eyes darted nervously, her polished confidence completely gone. Denzel leaned closer to the microphone, his voice steady, deliberate, unflinching. History doesn't forgive leaders who sell their country for applause. History writes them down for what they were: frauds. And Karoline, deep down, you know Trump will be remembered as the man who promised everything and delivered nothing but division. That is his legacy. That is your shame for defending it. Karoline lowered her head, the fight drained from her. The camera zoomed in on Denzel's face, etched with fire and calm authority. The audience's roar was deafening, not just applause but the sound of truth landing like a hammer. The studio felt like it had transformed into a courtroom, and Denzel was the prosecutor, delivering his final blow. The audience leaned forward, every pair of eyes fixed on him as he took a deep breath and spoke with the calm weight of absolute conviction. Karoline, America doesn't need another excuse-maker, another spin doctor, another loyal defender of a man who treated the presidency like a reality show. What this nation needs is honesty, accountability, and leaders who understand that power is not about enriching yourself, but about serving the people. Trump failed at that. Miserably. And your defense of him is nothing more than a cover-up for his failures. He paused, scanning the room, letting the silence amplify his words. Trump didn't fight for America. He fought for his image. He fought for his brand. And in the end, he fought to stay relevant, no matter how much damage he left behind. That's not leadership, it's weakness dressed up as strength. Karoline opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The audience had already decided where they stood. Cheers shook the walls, the crowd rising to their feet with thunderous applause. Some shouted, "Tell it, Denzel," while others simply roared in agreement. Denzel's gaze softened slightly as he looked past Karoline and directly into the camera, addressing not just the studio but millions watching at home. America, stop settling for spectacle. Stop settling for lies. This country has been through too much to be sold out like a cheap show. We deserve better. And the sooner we admit that, the sooner we can finally move forward. The ovation was deafening. Karoline sat frozen in her chair, a hollow smile plastered on her face, unable to mask the sting of defeat. Meanwhile, Denzel remained standing, shoulders squared, his voice having carved through the noise like a blade of truth. The cameras caught the moment perfectly, one figure silenced, another towering, not with volume, but with unshakable moral authority. And in that instant, the entire nation knew this exchange would live far beyond the broadcast. It would be remembered as the night Denzel dismantled not just a defender of Trump, but the entire illusion that had propped him up. The host barely managed to close the segment, drowned out by the relentless cheers. Denzel simply nodded once, then stepped back, his face unreadable but his presence undeniable. The verdict had been delivered.